Gentle lady yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bill Rockus, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it very much. Thanks for holding this hearing. Mr. Chu, your algorithms have prioritized providing harmful content directly to children, like self-harm challenges and even suicide. Just 3 days ago, Italy opened an investigation into the TikTok over user safety concerns after the so-called French scar challenge went viral on your platform. I know you know about the blackout challenge, which others may know as the choking challenge that encourages children to bring them to the point of unconsciousness or in some cases, tragically, death. If that isn't enough, I want to share the story of Chase Nasca, a 16-year-old boy from New York who tragically ended his life a year ago by stepping in front of a train. I want to thank his parents. Again, they are here. I want to thank his parents for being here today and allowing us to show this. Mr. Chu, your company destroyed their lives. Your company destroyed their lives. I admire their courage to be here and share Chase's story in the hopes that it will prevent this from happening to other families. The content in Chase's For You page was not a window to discovery, as you boldly claimed in your testimony. It wasn't content from a creator that you invited to roam the hill today, or STEM education content that children in China see. Instead, his For You page was sadly a window to discover suicide. It is unacceptable, sir, that even after knowing all these dangers, you still claim TikTok is something grand to behold. I want you to see what Chase would see. And I think if you want, again, would you share this content with your children, with your 2 children? Would you want them to see this? And again, I want to warn everyone watching that you may find this content disturbing, but we need to watch this, please.
Larry took. You got to kill yourself.
Oh, word? Like right now?
And then I'm gonna put a shotgun in my mouth and blow the brains out of the back of my head.
Cool.
This is a cute story. My brother, who is addicted to painkillers, blew his head off on the State Street Bridge. Bam! Now hold on, it gets better. No letter, no goodbye, nothing.
I got a question. If I died, would you miss me?
Mr. Chu, please. Your technology is literally leading to death. Mr. Chu, yes or no? Do you have full responsibility for your algorithms used by TikTok to prioritize content to its users? Yes or no, please?
Congressman, I'll just like to, if respectfully, if you don't mind, I would just like to start by saying it's devastating to hear about the news of, as a father myself, this is tragic.
Yes or no? I'll repeat the question. Do you have full responsibility over the algorithms used by TikTok to prioritize content to its users? Yes or no, please?
Congressman, we do take these issues very seriously.
Yes or no?
And we do provide resources for anyone who types in anything that...
Sir, yes or no? I see you're not willing to answer the question or take any responsibility for your parents' companies, the technology, and the harms it creates. It's just very, very sad. Very sad.
It's very sad.
This is why Congress needs to enact a comprehensive privacy and data security law to give Americans more control over their information and to protect our children. We must save our children from big tech companies like yours who continue to abuse and manipulate them for your own gain. And I'll yield back, Madam Chair.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the lady from Florida, Ms. Castor, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, it is urgent that the Congress pass an online data privacy law that protects the personal privacy of Americans online, and particularly our kids. While this hearing shines a light on TikTok, this hearing also should serve as a call to action for the Congress to act now to protect Americans from surveillance, tracking, personal data gathering, and addictive algorithmic operations that serve up harmful content and has a corrosive effect on our kids' mental and physical well-being. For many years, I've sounded the alarm in this committee of how big tech platforms like TikTok and Facebook and Instagram incessantly surveil, track, gather personal private information, and use it along with data brokers to target and influence our behavior. This is a much broader issue than TikTok in China. There are other malign actors across the world who gather data to use it as an element of social control and influence peddling and worse. And as I detailed in this committee last year when we passed our online privacy law, the harms to children are very serious and demand swift action. Big tech platforms profit immensely from keeping children addicted. They do not care about the privacy, safety, and health of our kids. They are the modern-day tobacco and cigarette companies that for so long resisted and misled Congress. And it took action by the Congress to actually protect our kids and to outlaw smoking by young people. In early 2020, based upon the growing body of evidence to harm to kids online, I introduced the Kids Privacy Act and the KIDS Act. And I want to thank all of the researchers, the young people, the parents, the Surgeon General of the United States who have explained the correlation between social media usage and body dissatisfaction, disordered eating habits, anxiety, depression, self-injury, suicide ideation, and cyberbullying. Heck, Frances Haugen, the Facebook whistleblower, was right here and testified to us that Facebook and Instagram conducted research on this topic. They knew and understood the harms, but they continued to elevate profits over the well-being of children. And TikTok does the same. Last Congress, when we passed the ADPPA, the committee incorporated many of these important child online privacy and safety provisions from my bills, but we can make the 118th Congress's version of this bill, of this new law, even more protective of children, and I look forward to working with the chair and the ranking member to make that happen. Mr. Chu, TikTok has incredible sway over children in the U.S., but you don't have a very good track record. In 2019, TikTok was hit with the largest civil penalty by the Federal Trade Commission in a children's privacy case. 4 years later, TikTok still has not taken sufficient action to fix the problems. I assume because child users are incredibly profitable to your bottom line. So answer me this. TikTok allows advertisers to specifically target advertising to children aged 13 to 17, correct?
Congresswoman, I do want to disagree
Yes
with the
or no?
statement that child abusers are not allowed on our platform at
Yes
all.
or
It's
no?
deplorable
Do you
conduct and it's not
target-
allowed on our
do you
platform.
target advertising to young people aged 13 to 17?
We do serve personalized
Okay, thank
advertising
you.
at this point,
And
but the
how
policies
much
are very
money-
safe for
How
them.
much money does TikTok make selling ads targeted to minors?
Congresswoman, can I clarify minors in what age?
From just say age 13 to 17.
For the teenage population, I want to clarify that we do have a under 13 experience and they have zero advertising on that platform. For those,
Well, that's a whole other topic.
Between 13 and 17, if you don't mind, I'll check into my team and get back to you on those answers.
You know, TikTok could be designed to minimize the harm to kids, but a decision was made to aggressively addict kids in the name of profits. And it's our responsibility, members, to act swiftly to address this. This has gone on for too long. We've dilly-dallied too much. This committee, thankfully, we've taken responsibility and acted, but we have an enormous responsibility to act swiftly and get this bill to the floor of the House and passed into law as soon as possible. Thank you. I yield back my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chu, I'm an information technology professional, been doing it for the most of my life. You've been evasive in many of your answers. I'm going to talk to you in some language that maybe you'll better understand, ones and zeros, okay? Let's talk about the Citizen Lab report. This is something your team frequently mentions in hearings as a way to exonerate yourself. For example, in the limitations section, it reads, we could not examine every source code component and test in the apps in every circumstance, which means our methods could not find every security issue, privacy violation, and censorship event. So it's an incomplete assessment. The report notes that TikTok's data collection using third-party trackers was in apparent conflict with the GDPR and that multiple themes were censored by TikTok. What is shocking to me is the shared source code between TikTok in the United States and the CCP-censored Douyin. The Citizen Labs report says that many of the functions and classes were identical and that the differences in behavior between TikTok in the United States and Douyin in China are slight changes in hard-coded values. Incredibly, specific censorship parameters from Douyin are present in TikTok, but just turned off. The authors say that for unknown reasons, the parameter variable itself is preserved. So while Citizen Lab may have been afraid to say the obvious conclusion, Mr. Chu, I am not. TikTok's source code is riddled with backdoors and CCP censorship devices. Here's the truth. In 1 million lines of code, the smallest shift from a 0 to a 1 on just one of thousands of versions of TikTok on the market will unlock explicit CCP censorship and access to American data. Mr. Chu, as CEO of TikTok, why have you not directed your engineers to change this source code?
Congressman, thank you for the question.
Have you directed them to change the source code?
Like what we are offering and
Yes
my
or
fourth
no?
commitment?
Have you directed them to change that source code?
Congressman, if you give me a bit of time to just...
No,
explain
I don't. It's a yes or no question. Have you directed your engineers to change that source code?
I'm not sure I understand it.
Why are you allowing TikTok to continue to have the capacity for censorship, and yet you claim here that you don't? Let me remind you of something. Do you realize that making false and misleading statements to Congress is a federal crime?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So have you directed your engineers to change that source code?
I am giving third-party access monitoring by experts. And Congressman, you are an expert on this. You could agree with me that no other company
TikTok
does
source
this.
code is the same as Douyin? What percentage?
I can get back to you on the specifics.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Where was the source code for TikTok developed? Was it developed in China or in the United States?
It's a global collaborative effort, like a lot of code for a lot of companies.
Was it developed in China? Some of it?
Some of it is.
Okay, at ByteDance. When it's compiled in the compilation process, can bytecode be manipulated? We've talked a lot about source code. What about the bytecode, the ones and zeros that actually execute on the device? Can it be manipulated? Yes.
Congressman, to give you comfort, that's why we're giving third-party monitors.
Yes,
As an expert, I think you can agree that very few companies
I've got
offer
the
to do this.
report here by Citizen Lab. I want to read you something from Ron Diebert. Specifically, in your written testimony to Congress, you stated on page 9, Citizen Lab found that there was no overt data transmission by TikTok to the Chinese government and that TikTok did not contact any servers within China. You implied that Citizen Lab exonerated TikTok from any information sharing with China. Well, the director of Citizen Lab saw this and issued a statement correcting the record yesterday. And I'm quoting Ron Diebert, the director of the lab. I am disappointed that TikTok executives continue citing the Citizen Lab's research in their statements to government as somehow exculpatory. I've called them out on this in the past, and it's unfortunate that I have to do it again, unquote. He goes on to say, and I quote, "We even speculated about possible mechanisms through which the Chinese government might use unconventional techniques to obtain TikTok user data via pressure on ByteDance," end of quote. Mr. Chu, you sent Congress written testimony citing this lab as a support of your claim that China cannot access user data, U.S. user data. And now this lab has come out to say, we never said that. That's misleading, Mr. Chu. I hope you understand what that is. That's misleading. Mr. Chu, this is yet another instance of TikTok attempting to mislead Americans about what their technology is capable of and who has access to their information. Madam Chair, I'd like to
respond to that very
Ron
quickly,
Diebert and the Citizens Lab into the record.
Without objections?
With
so
that, I
ordered.
yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair yields to the gentleman from Maryland. Mr. Sarbanes, 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Chu, I'm going to pick up on a theme we've already covered here, which is the effect that your platform, along with many other social media platforms, by the way, has in terms of mental and behavioral health in this country. I won't speak to what's happening elsewhere in the world, but we've talked about the impact that it's having on children, on teens. We took some action last year in this committee to try to improve access to resources. We authorized critical programs to address mental health needs, but we need to do even more than that. And we got to address what the big tech companies like TikTok are doing, because those are platforms that expose children, teens to additional risks. The more time that middle and high schoolers spend on social media, the evidence is the more likely they are to experience depression and anxiety. And this is particularly troubling since apparently 16% of American teenagers report that they use TikTok, quote, almost constantly. That's, I think, about 5 million teenagers in this country that are on TikTok all the time. And we know that big tech, including TikTok, uses design features that can manipulate users, including children and teens, to keep them engaged, designed to feed them a never-ending stream of content, keep their attention for hours on end, which includes capitalizing on the desire for others' approval through like features, preying on the fear of missing out through push notifications and so forth. Again, you're part of an industry that's set up to do this. You, in some sense, don't appear to be able to help yourselves in reaching out and finding that new user and then holding on to them. TikTok itself has acknowledged that these features and others, like the endless scroll feature, can have an outsized effect on teens. And we've been discussing today how your app only intensifies that harm by amplifying dangerous content and misinformation. I don't want to be too paternalistic here because we have young people in the audience. We've got TikTok users that are watching this hearing, and I'm sure they have their own ideas about how this technology is being managed by TikTok and other social media platforms. They like to access the platforms, and they should be able to do that safely, so it's certainly in their interest, and they can drive this conversation, I think, perfectly well. But it's not a fair fight, is it? I mean, the algorithms are on one side of the screen. The human brain is on the other side of the screen, drowning in these algorithms, in many instances at an age where the brain's not even fully developed yet. So those addictive impulses are being sort of perfected by the technology, and again, it leaves the users sort of helpless in the face of that. Are you looking at ways to redesign core features like the ones I mentioned to be less manipulative, and addictive for users, and can you commit to making some of those modifications here today?
Congressman, thank you. We do want to be leading in terms of safety of our users, particularly for teenagers. we were the first to launch a 60-minute watch limit.
Yeah, let's talk about the 60-minute launch.
And I'm very glad to see people, others in our industry follow. For many of your recommendations, we'll study them very seriously. Yeah. We actually have a series of features. Like, for example, if you're under 16, you cannot use a direct messaging feature because we want to protect those younger users. If you're under 16, you cannot go viral by default. If you're under 18, you cannot go live. And
let me go back to the 60-minute limit because my understanding is that teens can pretty easily bypass the notification to continue using the app if they want to. I mean, let's face it, our teens are smarter than we are by half, and they know how to use the technology, and they can get around these limits if they want to. Are you measuring how many teens continue to exceed the 60 minutes of time on that app?
We
Any
understand
sense how that's working?
We understand those concerns. Our intention is to have the teens and their parents have these conversations about what is the appropriate amount of time for social media. That's why we give the parents what we call family
Let me ask you this question before I run out of time. If you concluded that putting some reasonable limits in place and trying to find a way to enforce them would lead some percentage of your users to leave TikTok and go somewhere else, is that something that you're prepared to accept?
Yes.
Really? Well, I'd love to get the research on how these limits are being implemented, how they're being bypassed, and the things that you're taking, the measures you're taking to address those issues going forward. Please bring that information back to our committee as we move forward.
I'll be happy to.